All right, well, we don't have a lot of time. It's only an hour, and we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to invite the panelists to come up while I start to speak. So, panelists, why don't we head on? Thank you, Chad, for the very kind introduction. I think he just admires my haircut.
Going that direction.
Yes. So we have as I say, we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to jump right in and describe what it is we're doing and how we're going to try and do it. My name is Dan May, as was just mentioned. I work for Futurepreneur Canada. We lend money and provide mentors to young entrepreneurs. To do that, we want to make sure that an entrepreneur is well placed for success, that they have the right skills, that they have the right potential to achieve their dreams, so that they can create opportunity in their own organization and others, and jobs for the betterment of society. So we are a proud long-serving member of YVI, and what is the value of that? The network. A network actually is, as Chad was just citing, network is a bit of a skill that you will require in the future, building these interactions with people in the network and learning from each other in the network, so that we can continue to grow ourselves and support the entrepreneurs that we serve. And so as part of that, we have a great panel here today that are going to try and convey their thoughts on what future skills we're going to need for entrepreneurs. If we go back 50 years, for example, we might have been saying to a young person, you should get a job maybe at Kodak or something like that. You know, get a skill, get a trade, and work your way up through an organization. As we go back even 20 years ago, that dynamic started to shift. 10 years ago, the world was turned on its head. And 5 years ago, a lot of the companies that are now powering were just starting to create their opportunities. If we look 10 years into the future, which was a comment that Nick, one of our speakers, mentioned yesterday, 85% of the jobs that are going to be in the market in 10 years from now don't exist today. We don't know what they are. You can choose a number, it may be 70, it may be 50, who knows? It's 10 years from now. We're not going to have a sense. So what do we need to do to ensure that the young people of today, anyone in the workforce today, is well equipped to be able to transform and get into that opportunity? So with that in mind, we're just maybe a logistics before we get going. We're going to use Slido for questions. We're going to have two roaming mics. So please get yourself in the mindset as you're listening to the introduction from our panel, so that you can be ready to pose some challenging and provocative questions, because we're going to want them to be provocative with you and challenge you as well. So without further ado, our panel: Branca, independent consultant, Future Work Consulting; Namita Datta, Coalition Manager of S4YE Coalition; Heidi Strawson, Global Giving Lead from Accenture; and our surprise panelist, even to our panelist, is our Young Entrepreneur of the Year award winner, Burham Monkshuren, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, who wasn't aware she was going to be on the panel until last night when she was, or yesterday afternoon when she was awarded. So she has an incredibly unique perspective on how you equip people from all areas. We're going to have a true spectrum of where we're trying to find the right skills and apply it to all corners of the earth. So please welcome the panelists. And one other logistic that I should have highlighted, and I'm not sure it's been mentioned today, but Twitter, if you're on Twitter, tweet, and hashtag GYES 2019. We want to make sure so this is being live streamed on YouTube, and we want to make sure that everybody has a chance not only to see it on YouTube, but also to be able to experience the conversation through the Twitter feed. So whatever social medium that you choose to use, please communicate and let the world know what it is we're doing, and giving them great ideas on how they can equip themselves. And without further ado, I'm going to start off with Branca, who is at the top of my list, to give a provocative introduction.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be here.
Mike's beside you.
Oh, okay. So good morning, everybody. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I am here to introduce actually the work that I have done for YBI with support from Accenture on the soft skills for the future for entrepreneurs. And I spent about 20-some years in corporate America, and then I became a seniorpreneur. So I have my own company, and I support donors, investors, companies, NGOs, specifically in international youth development. So here is what I have for you this morning. So soft skills are teachable. Second thing is they are critical for success of entrepreneurs. Maybe I would dare to say even more important than hard skills. And the third thing is that it is not about what you think. It's not about the soft skills that you're already teaching. If you want to prepare young entrepreneurs for the future, you have to think new and amplified skills. And if you want to know what those are, you have to read our study, and you can come talk to me at that table. I have a handout for you. So that's where I will stop.
All right, thank you, Branca. And next, Namita.
Morning, everybody. Just delighted to be here. I'm head of Solutions for Youth Employment. That's a global program that's based at the World Bank. And YBI and Accenture are our founding partners, so I'm particularly delighted to be here. So yesterday there was a lot of discussion about technology, about how rapidly the world is changing around us. Technology is sort of throwing up new opportunities. It's literally reshaping the world of work. It's making sort of unleashing quantum leaps in the productivity of firms. It's also changing the way governments are delivering services. I mean, just using the power of technology. So if you just look at the speed and scale at which technology is changing things around us, it's pretty exciting. But I think what I wanted to do with these few sort of minutes that you gave me, I wanted to really bring a question on the table. And that is, with this fourth industrial revolution, are we going to actually change the inequality that we see in the world around us? I mean, this is really, really important, because we see groups of people, populations that are systematically and structurally disconnected, disenfranchised. So is the inequality in the analog world going to be replicated in the digital world, or are we going to use this to actually break through that? And what I mean is, for example, people in rural areas. I mean, 70 to 80% of poor in sub-Saharan Africa are in rural areas, and they are dependent on agriculture. And this is low productivity agriculture. What are we going to do? And by the way, half this population is offline. What are we going to do about them? Number one. The other group I wanted to highlight, and we can really look at disconnected people, but the other group I wanted to highlight is women. I mean, you really look at any indicator on the gender gap in terms of access to good quality jobs, and you're going to find a gap, whether it's about access to skills, access to education, access to credit, access to markets, access to information. You will always find a gap between men and women. And by the way, it still exists in the developed world. So this is an obstinate, stubborn, persistent inequality. Are we going to do something about it, or are we going to leave these groups behind? But I think that there is a power in technology, because of its scale, that we can, for a moment, but we have to be very intentional about it. We have to build it into our programs, that we can really transform how we include these populations. And just a quick example, and then I'll shut up. These important projects that I'm seeing come up, they're both implemented by our organization, the World Bank, but also several of you here, which are really about unlocking microjobs, for example. Microjobs, we've done projects where poor, illiterate women, I mean, some of them with very basic levels of literacy and numeracy, are being trained to get and find microjobs, which are small tasks like data entry or image tagging. It's really changing the economic empowerment of women. I think there is something there that we should look at. But it won't happen automatically. We have to be intentional. Rural youth. I mean, this is again, when I look at data coming from Alibaba, Taobao.com clusters, really unleashing the power of e-commerce and retail in rural areas. Or when you look at the power that global value chains bring in, especially in agribusiness, where you can really connect large companies with agripreneurs in rural areas. It's a very different way of looking at this whole agenda. And I think I really want to put that on the table for discussion today, because it's not going to go away on its own unless we are systematically looking at tweaks in our program design to include women like that, or rural youth like that.
All right. Thank you, Namita. And over to you, Heidi.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Is this on?
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm still feeling a little bit uncomfortable from folding my arms in the wrong way. I think for us, with that sort of disruptive mindset in my mind, we think this is time to really reimagine workforce development at Accenture. And I speak really, I'm interested in fielding questions both from the perspective of a global employer. We have a headcount of something like 350,000 people and rising. We receive applications in the order of about 1 million CVs or resumes a year, which we have to process and interpret to inform our own talent pipeline. So we're passionate about bringing forward the right kind of people to deliver the work that we see as we envisage the future for our clients. So thank you. And we also speak from the perspective of an organization that partners with over 500 non-profit organizations around the world, equipping people from a more disadvantaged background to get the skills or start a business. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we embarked on a piece of research where we canvassed input from those partners. We conducted in-depth interviews with industry experts, psychologists, corporate partners, talent strategists, educational experts, some of the organizations represented in the room today. We did some data analysis on 130 million job placements. We assessed 1,000 work solution programs, and we looked at 25 skilling frameworks. The result of this was a piece of research, and again, shamelessly plugging it, you can look online and we'll make this posting available. We came up with a point of view on the skills that are going to be required to position young people with the skills to thrive in a digital era. And we call this New Skills Now. We identified 6 essential skills families within which you have at least 3 levels of competence. And we believe that in order to thrive, a young person needs to have skills from each of those groups. And I think one of the interesting things when we consider a digital era is the ability to operate with digital fluency, the ability to engage with technology skills is one important dimension. Everyone, and in fact all of us, need a level, a sort of entrance level of digital literacy, and we can perhaps talk a little bit about that. But to reinforce Branca's point, that's almost the least of our interests here. Having what we would call a growth mindset, having the agility to rethink, reposition, and reapply yourself in the context of work is, to our minds, paramount. And what that means, really, and interestingly, when we looked at the various workforce solutions and curricula that are out there, is that that's perhaps the least understood and one of the most difficult to enable practically. We've explored, and so what we did was we invited some of our partners and others out there to use this framework to really follow through and explore what does this practically mean in terms of how we're going to equip and deliver these much needed skills, and how, to Namita's point, are we going to be particularly able to address those that might face a double disadvantage of being not in contention to have some of the opportunities that others have. How are we going to reach them to position them to fulfill their economic potential and in fact their human potential? I'm interested in fielding questions around how technology can both disrupt that that status quo and why we need to reimagine workforce development given the pace of change of technology today, but also how technology can enable and secure opportunities. And we're seeing some really impressive and powerful examples where technology is being used to help evolve and enable the development of some of those skills.
Thank you, Heidi. So we're going to go from fairly standard kind of a perspective that you folks have just presented to a very different perspective, I think, of a rural nomadic existence that most of us, at least I can say, I'm completely unfamiliar with, other than moving from city to city. I'm going to ask Burham to maybe give us a perspective on her nomadic background, how she manages to grow a successful business alongside of looking after children and taking care of cattle and empowering the skills to create an opportunity in that environment.
За бүгдээрэнд нь өглөөний мэнд хүргэе. За би Бөмсөрн. Тэгээд энэ сахан арга хэмжээнээс шилдэгээр шалгарсандаа их баяртай байна. Дахин баяртай байна.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Muksuru. I'm very happy to be here, and even I'm honored to receive this wonderful award from the YBI.
Өнөөдөр бас би өөрөө Монголын говийн хөдөөний малчин эмэгтэй учраас өнөөдөр бас өөрийнхөө уралсан төлөвийг үүсэж ирсэн байгаа. Тэгээд
I'm a camel herder, and at the same time I'm an entrepreneur. And today I brought actually 3 dresses, which I made. And the first day, the first one, and the second day, the last night, I had another one. And today I will wear the third one. This is actually what I knitted.
за миний хувьд бол өчтөр бас танилцсан 3 охинтой, 3 хүүхэдтэй. Тэгээд энэнийхээ зэрэгцээ хүүхдүүдэд асрах, мөн бизнесээ явуулах, мал аж ахуйгаа эхлэх гээд 3 тишинэ одоо нэг салбарсан ажилтай. Тийм учраас эдгээр амжуулахын тулд бол надад бол ерөнхийдөө боловсрол их манай яг надтай адилхан эмэгтэйчүүдийн хувьд бол боловсрол их дутуу байдаг. Тийм учраас дижитал боловсрол их чухал байгаа.
So I have 3 daughters. Yesterday I mentioned briefly, if you understood. So I have to take care of my children at first, but they live in the village, and also I have to take care of my business. My business is in the other location, and also I have camels, and the camels are also in the rural area outside. So I have to be at the 3 different locations at the same time. So I believe that digital literacy is a very important part for especially women entrepreneurs. We need to learn these skills, how to use those digital tools to manage all of this.
Тэгээд ер нь бол өөрийнхөө нэг түүхээс ярив. Бидний үед бол бага багт маань бол ерөнхийдөө ямар юмд нэг хэл дуулгах ч юм уу сумын төрөөгөө жоохон аслагмал байдаг учраас сумын төрөөгөө хэл дуулгахын тулд тэмээгээр явдаг байсан. Тэгээд тэмээгээр бол хэдэн цаг явж цаг алддаг байсан. Одоо бол өнөөгийн нийгэмд бол интернет сүлжээ гэж маш сайхан одоо юу гэдэг орж ирсэн учраас ажиллаа бол ер нь бол интернетээр утсаар их амжуулж байгаа. Тийм учраас дижитал боловсролыг бол ерөөсөн сайн хөгжүүлэх хэрэгтэй байгаа.
So today, how I manage all these 3 different location issues, I would like to share the small history of my childhood. When I was a child, we used to ride a camel or horse to transfer the message to each other. Our neighborhood, like at least 50 to 60 kilometers from each other, and we have to ride a camel or horse to give a message to each other. But today, we have a social media or internet in our villages. Therefore, it's very easy to access to each other using this opportunity. So we are, before we had a waste of time or waste of energy, but today it's easy actually to take care of our children. Actually, for example, what they're doing now, we can control it very easily using the digital opportunities. And also I can contact with our employees and other business partners using the Facebook or some other social media opportunities.
За одоо ингээд энэ бол ер нь бол миний нэг одоо ганц хэлхийг хүссэн зүйл байсан юм аа.
Okay, this is actually what I want to share, like the women need skills on how to work, how to use that digital tools to ease their livelihood and as well as doing business.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm a translator.
Excellent. So from the opening comments, and we're going to go to the floor for questions and Slido in a moment, but from the opening comments, we've heard a little bit about infrastructure challenges that could be faced in certain parts of the world, and that really is a larger public policy conversation that can and should be had. There's no question there. However, as a group of organizations who deal with entrepreneurs on the front line, what from that, keeping maybe AI or higher education, structured education skills, park those for a moment. What can we as organizations who deal with the entrepreneurs, what would be maybe the top of mind skill that you think would be important for us to be able to communicate to entrepreneurs, or at least encourage them to be focusing in on and attaining over time? Branca, do you want to start off?
Yes. If there is one skill that I think we should add to the mix right away, that's to train young people to be able to focus, direct focus and sustain attention. And the best way to do this is by practicing mindfulness. Harvard Business Review just came yesterday with an article with scientific proof how practicing mindfulness really enhances the capacity of the brain to make decisions and to adjust to stress. So I have seen this in practice in a school in South Africa that takes 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon for young people to meditate, and the results of integrating that in their program have been just astounding. So if there is one thing that we should all practice, because of the incredible amount of data that technology and social media generates, because of all the bombardment of facts and fake news and real news that we are experiencing, it's really to train our mind for that attention span, and that can be done through practicing mindfulness. So I would recommend that all programs, aside from what they're teaching, incorporate that on a daily basis.
I really like what you said, Branca. I really do like it. I think this little exercise we did a few minutes ago was also an example of a high level of self-awareness, like constantly being aware of yourself and how you're thinking and how you're so involved in your thoughts that you've forgotten to listen to the other person. I really like what you said, Branca. I wanted to add one more to that. So the World Bank put this World Development Report out there. It's called The Future of Jobs, and there are 3 big policy recommendations that we came away with. But the top one is what I want to highlight. And it's this whole thing, which is, I think, what Branca said and Heidi emphasized too. It's this whole issue of what is called lifelong learning. I think that era is gone where you kind of educated yourself, you went to school, you went to college, you got a job, you got promoted, you retired, and then you collected a pension. I think the world we are in now, we are going to constantly change either jobs or we are going to change the sectors we are working in, or that sector will just change beneath our feet, literally within years, literally. Like, you know, you've just about found your feet and the world has changed around you. So this whole thing, and we in the World Bank are struggling with how do we operationalize this concept of lifelong learning. And part of it is also not just for youth, it's for people of the older generation, is this whole thing about reskilling. So this element of curiosity, I think that's how I would just say it, lifelong learning and a constant curiosity to learn new things is what I would say.
Excellent, thank you. Heidi.
Thanks. So I think I don't differentiate between the skills that you need to be a young entrepreneur or the skills that you need to have a job, because in the context of the future of work, the boundaries, the delineations between how you earn a living will change. The concept of a job or a job for life, if you work in the gig economy, I mean, there is a real blurring of the lines. And Dan, I think if you're looking for the one single skill, we're not going to give you that, because you need a host of different things. But I'm going to just reinforce the point Namita's making. 65% of children in school today will earn an income, if not, let's say, have a job in an area that doesn't exist today. And to your point about sort of just workforce disruption, 1 in 10 jobs will be lost as a result of disruption. So this idea of being a lifelong learner, it is absolutely profound and fundamental. And because what we start doing, you know, when we leave school, whatever point we enter into the workforce, that's just the beginning of the story. And we need to be able to position ourselves and be agile to adapt and address the opportunities before us. I liked what Nick Carey reflected on in his keynote remarks yesterday. He talked about the importance of creativity and resilience. And I think this concept of grit is always one that we associate with an entrepreneurial mindset. But creativity and grit, being able to pick yourself back up and reimagine yourself going forward and be resourceful and to be able to tap into the resources around you, informal, formal, whatever they might be, to position yourself for your next gig, whatever that might be. So that builds on that sort of that centrum that I was referring to as a growth mindset. I find that a convenient kind of placeholder to put a lot of that skills, and it's a mindset and an attitude as well as a skill.
And actually, the study supports both what Namita and Heidi said, that, you know, one of the skills in this framework of future skills is active learning skills and motivation to continuously learn. So those two are something that programs should be able to develop. And these active learning skills are actually related to not only being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, but also picking the right strategy for learning, so on an individual basis. So young people have to be able to know not only how to do it, but what are the best strategies and paths to do it. And in terms of creativity, there is another new skill, amplified skills, that's called co-creativity. So we are seeing now more and more the need for young people to get together and use all technology that is available to them, or connections, you know, form connections, so they can co-create together.
Excellent, thank you. I think we're starting to see an interesting tapestry develop here. I want to go back to Burham for a quick question on female entrepreneurs and the challenges, and this may or may not be unique to Mongolia or your environment, but how do you see setting up young women for success and growing a business, and what do you think they need, how they need to be supported to build the skills to thrive?
За ингээд түрүүн ярьсантай бол бүгднтэй санал нэгтэй байна. Тэгээд миний хувьд бол гэж бодож байна. Юу н эмэгтэй хүн одоо яг миний амьдралд би өөрөө бол ихтэй сургуулийн боловсрол эзэмшээгүй учраас ерөнхийдөө бол өөрийнхөө амьдрал дээрээс ингээд суралцаж ээжийнхээ зөвлөгөөний дагуу ингээд явхад бол үр хүүхдийнхээ ирээдүйн боловсролын төлөө бол маш их анхаарах хэрэгтэй байна гэж бодсон. Тийм учраас гэхдээ яг ер нь бол хүн ихтэй сургууль төгслөөгөө заавал төгсөх ёстой, заавал ихтэй сургууль мэргэжил боловсрол эзэмших ёстой гэж байгаа юм шиг л дээ. Ер нь бол хүн өөрийн гэсэн зорилго тэмүүлэлтэд хүрэхийн тулд хичээх хэрэгтэй. Юуны тулд одоо юуд зорьсон тэрнийхээ төлөө тэмцэх хөлмөрч байх хэрэгтэй, бүтээлч байх хэрэгтэй л гэж боддог доо.
Actually, I agree with you, all our panelists, and especially for women herders, women entrepreneurs in rural areas, the education is an important part to strive in life. And I didn't go to the university or college, but the most important thing is the commitment. And I have set a vision for my life, and even I have three daughters, and in my vision actually it includes my three daughters how to be more educated in the future. And so why I'm doing this business and is to show my daughters as a role model, and showing them like what we can do as a woman. And even in my family, my mother was a very good mentor for me. And to be here, to achieve this success, my mentors and even my mother they played an important role. And I believe that education, health for women is a very important factors to be successful.
Ер нь бол тийм учраас эмэгтэйчүүдийнхээ боловсрол эрүүл мэндийн тал руу бол их хэхэн анхаарах хэрэгтэй байна гэж боддог. Тэгээд ер нь эмэгтэйчүүдийн хувьд бол юу гэдэг сурч мэдгээсээ илүү эрүүл байх хэрэгтэй, өөрөө бүтээлч авах хэрэгтэй.
And also the women entrepreneurs must learn how to be resilient and how to be creative, and within these existing conditions. And because we have a lot of barriers, difficulties, however, we have to skip over all these challenges. But in order to do that, we have to learn, we have to gain more knowledge on that skills, and even like how to be more healthy, how to be more educated. So that is what I want to share.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to invite the audience to chime in here. We obviously want to be encouraging youth and our society in general to be embracing technology at whatever degree they can. If they can get into artificial intelligence, wonderful. If they are just savvy at using the internet to promote their businesses and gain skills over time, that's great. So that's something we want to encourage. And I'm hearing a lot about the soft skills, creativity, resilience, agility, grit, and mindfulness. I think all of these, they are brilliant points. But how do we as organizations who deal with entrepreneurs or employees in general, as Heidi mentioned, how do we get those skills developed in youth, the next generation, or even other generations?
Yeah. Okay, shall I start? I think I love that question, Dan, because what we realize is, firstly, we've all got very different learning aptitudes and preferences, and we heard a little bit about this yesterday. But if you want to be a lifelong learner, then best that you're not switched off to learning at an early age. And we believe that, and our research tells us that some of the most effective programs are those that encourage playfulness and engagement, not at the expense of content, but a means of delivering content. And when you look at younger learners, particularly those who don't easily fit into mainstream education, or perhaps for whatever reason are unable to, then we need alternative routes to engage those young learners. I'd like to give an example from a field trip that I made on Monday in Medellin with some of my colleagues who are here in the room. We met one of our Accenture Columbia partners, Don Bosco, who are working with very disadvantaged youth in the context of Medellin society right now. Some of these kids are not in full-time education. They're interested in coding. That's a pretty ambitious intent for a kid who's not in school. One of the sort of foundational building blocks or skills building blocks to be a coder is to have problem solving and logic skills. We're playing to a domain which does engage these young people, namely online gaming and specifically Minecraft. We've got a, if anyone's a gamer, this will be familiar territory to you, but by creating a Minecraft world where those young people feel comfortable, they can, without even realizing it, spend hours at a time problem solving, developing and nurturing teaming and collaboration skills, and a kind of thought and logic that totally develops their skill set across a number of really important domains. It so happens they're benefiting from Accenture volunteer coaching alongside to really help heighten and drive value and build their confidence. Now, I love that example because it's using, in their case, an existing accessible free platform, and it's developing their skill journey without them even realizing it through the medium of play. Now, that may not resonate to many members of the audience who are working with an older cohort, but I think as a principle, being open to understanding a learner's needs, having that profile and that understanding, not just of their skills profile, but their preferences, their learning preferences, and for that young person to have an element of self-awareness and hopefully a sense of ownership in where they want to develop their strengths. That's really key, I think, to then tailoring programs that can develop the skills that they need.
So I hate that term soft skills because they are the hardest to teach. They're the hardest to develop, they're the hardest to assess. And over the years, as the theory of entrepreneurship has changed, also the approach to developing entrepreneurial skills has changed. So in the beginning, there was this belief that you're born entrepreneur, and the most important thing was to uncover if somebody is born entrepreneur or not. Well, we know that that was wrong and that you can actually breed entrepreneurs. Then there was this whole period of looking at the process of entrepreneurship from opportunity to, of course, success. And many programs today are structured based on these processes, learning, teaching, and developing these processes, ingraining that in entrepreneurs. Later on came another approach to not thinking about the personality or the process, but rather to how the entrepreneurs think and what successful entrepreneurs do to be successful, but in terms of their brain processes. And so that's where effectuation theory came, and many of you are already incorporating some elements of that. Well, there is another next step in that process, and that's this approach to building practices. And it is very successful, and one of the practices, there are 5 practices, but one of them is the practice of play. So teaching the practice of play, teaching the practice of empathy, the practice of creation, experimentation, and reflection. And if you help your young entrepreneurs build these techniques, then they will approach everything in life with that. And one final thing on soft skills that's very important is soft skills cannot be taught in few hours, not even in few days, because they reflect in behaviors. And to really have a transformation in someone's behaviors, you really have to do a much longer process. So how do we do that considering the limitations of our programs and funding? Well, you build the awareness in your program. So you tell people why it's important to listen for understanding and how to do that. So then you build the practice of listening. For example, I wanted to add, when Chad was teaching us to listen for understanding, there is a powerful technique called the echo technique. So basically, when somebody says, I am from Holland, instead of asking the question, you just said Holland and question mark, and then the person says, yes, I was actually born in Serbia, but I spent the rest of my life in Holland. Really born in Serbia? And that this echo technique, where you just take the end of somebody's sentence and you make it into a question, it can take you for hours to listen to the person and know everything about them. It's a very powerful sales technique also in front of an audience. So that's what we can develop in our short programs. But mentoring, and not only business mentoring, but really counseling and mentoring for developing these soft skills is the most powerful technique to really develop these hard to develop skills. And in the policy area, for donors and investors, it is very important to add additional investment in the post-training support. Very important.
So I just wanted to make 2 points. The one I think is on very careful research on delivery models. So I think there is one thing about the content of the skills and the training programs that we are putting out, but there's a whole lot of fascinating new research that's coming out in terms of designing how do you deliver it. And we in the World Bank are putting a lot of focus on behavioral science, like insights from behavioral science. Like how do if I make an online training program, I must make sure that the visual I have there looks like the person that I'm going to reach, the beneficiary. If I can, as a beneficiary, connect to this person or the graphic on the screen, then I'm more likely to think, yeah, this is about me. So, and then, as Heidi said, a lot of research in terms of gamification of delivery models. So I think there's a whole ton of work there that we really need to pay close attention to, because that increases the probability of uptake or impact of what you are doing with your entrepreneur programs. That's one. The second thing I think is the enormous power of role models, and Buram said that too. I think that is just something really, I mean, it's eye-opening how much you can do with just role models. And I think YBI is doing a great job with this whole award that I saw yesterday. It's really great. In the Middle East, for example, the World Bank, we have a large number of youth employment programs, and one of our biggest challenge there is young people don't want a private sector job. They don't want to be entrepreneurs. They want that public sector job. They want to work with the government. So shifting that mindset, how do you do that? Is really with bringing role models and really making people think that, oh, I can do that too. Oh, that's a decent career pathway to take. Women, for example, we found a really interesting study in India where there was reservation of certain political representative seats at the village level for women. The villages which started having these women leaders in their panchayats, suddenly you found that in those villages, young girls started delaying marriage. They started asking their parents that they wanted to be educated too. I mean, just imagine the power of a role model. A young girl suddenly feels, I can do that too, I have a voice too. We're finding this, especially on gender, I think the power of role models. We find when we look at scores, the PISA scores, we find girls outperform boys in all the maths and science courses consistently in a large number of countries. But then when you look at STEM occupations, which are generally more well-paying, you find fewer women. Again, the power of role models. And this is linked to the last question that you asked. What additional skills? I think when you're trying to bring in more women, it's this whole thing about self-esteem. That feeling, and it's so hard to teach, but most women tend to shortchange themselves. So this feeling that I can is a really important component, and I think it's linked to the last question that you asked. But really 2 things, delivery models, really careful research, and second is really on role models and really amplifying that, which YBI is doing a great job at.
Excellent. Thank you for the input. I'm going to now invite, are there anyone in the, is there anyone that have a question? Here we are. Someone's on Sligo. We do have some hands going up.
I have a question regarding how do you integrate informal learning and get recognized in the marketplace? For example, Buram gave an extremely good example of how she had to stop her formal education after high school. And as Namita was saying, 70% of the people in the rural areas have even less education than that. Now we can talk about getting to them in some manner and so on and so forth, but if they were to go to the marketplace, say to a lender or to anybody else and say, I am not educated, or I'm educated only to the 8th standard, but I have all these skills and I can start a business, there is nobody to believe that person, man or woman. So the question is, how do we really take people who may have experiential skills, not formal skills, and yet enable them to place a value in the marketplace for that?
Well, there is a new way of credentialing entrepreneurs that is based on the ecosystem credentialing. So instead of testing and looking at certain evaluations that are either self-directed or from the institution, you create a way that people who are in your ecosystem, for example, a microfinance institution, an instructor, a local training provider, they have a way of saying how they perceive your entrepreneur. And then entrepreneur is put through a series of qualifying events where those events, they demonstrate their skills that are learned through experience or through informal learning. And based on that, you have a badging that provides certain credentials to an entrepreneur that is not recognized necessarily in the formal education system. So there is a new way how to approach that, but definitely a great question.
Lashmi, I think my answer doesn't necessarily relate to the pool of young people that many of the members in this room support, but nevertheless I believe it's an indicator of a trend that we can expect, which is essentially about recruiting. We call this at Accenture recruiting for potential, not pedigree. And it is essentially identifying proxies for the potential performance of the candidate before you. And let me tell you what that means, and I think there are learnings that we can take into workforce development programs to anticipate this, because I think it's a trend that we can expect to see from other employers. I mentioned that we receive something in the region of 1 million applications a year. We're using a machine learning algorithm to do a first pass on those applications because we don't have the human capacity to fully appraise them. And what we realized was that we were tending to recruit people like us. We were perpetuating our own, if you like, sort of stereotype, and that was not enhancing our capacity to have a diverse workforce. And we believe that diversity will be essential for us to drive innovation and to function in a more equitable society. So we realized we needed to have a fundamental change. Instead of recruiting from, if you say, like the top 10 universities, we are university agnostic. In fact, we're tertiary education agnostic, and we look at a candidate's performance and cross-reference that to the norm in the context in which they were educated and brought up. So we're literally looking at social economic indicators and others that are for us a proxy of performance. So if they outperformed peers but were under par against the other applicants, for us, they potentially have potential. I think there are parallels to that we could use as proxies to inform a candidate's potential and position them for success, but that is going to take time for others to get on board.
So I think we have 10 minutes total before we wrap up, and we want to give everyone a chance to have a closing comment. So we're going to try a new format of speed rounds of questions. Maybe if we can ask the panelists to just throw an answer out quickly as concisely as possible. We can get through a few of the questions because there's some on Slido and there's still a few hands in the audience that were up. So new business models being created. What skills do entrepreneurs need in the future to lead teams?
VUCA skills. They need VUCA skills, and VUCA skills are reflected, come and ask me about it because I cannot do it.
You look like you have an answer ready. No? Okay.
We discussed this.
Okay, good. So, how do you successfully reach and support young entrepreneurs that are typically excluded? What kind of programs or initiatives? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
So we, for example, for the really marginally sort of the really poor people, marginalized was the word I was looking for, poor people, we have what is called a graduation approach. This is actually taken from successful examples from Branca. And the idea is a really sequence of 7 steps, which begins with soft skills and training and mentoring and coaching. But then at some point, and I'm happy to share that literature with you, we've really tried to kind of make it into a product now. At some point, at the 5th or the 6th stage, you actually also think in terms of an asset transfer, because only then can it be sustainable. And usually that asset transfer could be just cattle, in some cases a sewing machine, something that makes sure that the business is going to keep running. But that's called the graduation approach, is one example. It's tried and tested.
Dan, I was going to say, if you forgive the deflection, that we've got an example right on this stage of a young entrepreneur from a pretty marginalized community who did apparently benefit from some kind of outreach program. So I'd say, let's ask YBI's Mongolia member, how did you do that?
Baruch, do you want to answer? Are there any programs or initiatives that can reach harder to reach groups?
It's okay for me to answer because I'm not finalist. But well, we targeted different groups, like especially for women. And 3 years ago, we started the Women's Business Center which has an incubation center and only promoting vulnerable women entrepreneurs. And of course, the many men came and say, why only women? Why not us? But we saw that around the same, very similar number, we saw that about 70-80% of those potential entrepreneurs are women, but they don't know how to improve, how to scale up, and where to go to learn something, and therefore that we launched this center, and also we work with the disabled people, and disability is also the the excluded policy in Mongolia, that people know that there are many disabled people, but nobody cares about what they do. So disability entrepreneurship program is also very interesting in our country, and we try to help them. At least they can make something very interesting products or services. And also we closely work with rural herders, like our forum is also one of those. And remote Mongolia is like a big country with only 3 million people scattered, and we have many expats, even the tourists, like to come to Mongolia because when they go to the countryside, you cannot see anybody. That is just vast and empty land. So many people are free actually to do anything there. So tourists love to come there, but our herders even, they need to, when they communicate with each other, they at least because they locate at least 50-60 kilometers from each other, and to reach out to with each other, they have to go at least 50 kilometers by horse or by camel, or some of those have a motorbike or something. But today, actually, Facebook and other social media is helping them to access each other. So remote herders are very important targets for us. And so, so that means that the support programs, especially youth business support programs, even when we identify different targets, our curriculum and our all programs are more customized. Then we are able to reach, to access, and to help them to understand. For example, for deaf young people, we actually spend almost 3 days. But for normal people, 1 day, but for deaf people, 3 days, for example, training. Because it's different translation and understanding and how to make it much easier for those deaf young entrepreneurs. So we also hardly work to customize all programs for different target groups. So that is actually how we work.
Thank you. We're just about to go into the final comments, but I want to see if one more real person has a question out in the audience, so we can.
Hello, this is a question you cannot answer in one line, and we might have to take it out of the panel, but I would like to know if you see a difference, Branca, between the social skills for employment that we've worked very hard on, all the multilateral organizations, and those for entrepreneurs. Because you said you came up with a report, but I'm sure there is a difference, and I'm not sure it has been distinguished during the panel. It's been blurry.
Yes, we can talk about that in details, but the short answer, yes. There is a difference between soft skills for entrepreneurs versus soft skills for employment, and also the soft skills for each environment is somewhat different. So, in the study basically recommends that you look at the context, cohort, and the correct characteristics of the individual when you are designing your soft skills program. The same skills will not be on top of your list in Kosovo or in Netherlands. The same soft skills will not be important to develop for a cohort of young women who have to operate in a very traditional culture versus a set of deaf entrepreneurs who have to operate in Mongolia. And also, the individual has very specific gaps, and you have to incorporate that in the post-training support through mentoring, counseling, and coaching.
All right. So this has really been an interesting tying together of the soft and technical skills that entrepreneurs need to succeed. And I want to emphasize that it's not the start of the conversation. It's certainly not the end of the conversation. It's somewhere in the middle where we're expanding it to all of you. We have another day and a half here, I think, with everyone in the room, having these conversations. So please, I'd encourage you to continue asking these questions when you corner one of our panelists in the hallway or at the social gathering. And I believe everyone's on social media. I'm not sure if Burm is, but I would encourage, okay, so there we go. Of course, you mentioned that earlier, how she can reach the community. So I would encourage you to engage on that forum, engage in this forum, and continue these conversations. But I'm going to ask our panelists for one last closing thought, each of them. Maybe I'll just go down the line from here.
The risk of repeating myself, I think, just underlining the importance of curiosity and and lifelong learning, and seeking consistently, constantly. And this is not just true for youth, I think, for all of us, constantly seeking lessons from role models, that there's something to learn out there, and I think that's the kind of attitude to have. And by the way, on skills of entrepreneurs versus those in wage jobs, I think even in organizations, and I'm talking again, from the perspective of somebody who works in a fairly large, fairly bureaucratic organization, there is a lot of emphasis on what are called intrapreneurs. I mean, entrepreneurs within large organizations itself. So this entrepreneurial spirit is really key.
It's very hard to wrap up because we're really still warming up, but I would reflect that some of the models that I understand YBI members deploy, particularly with respect to mentors and mentor matching, allows a young person who perhaps lacks the skills to understand, well, one, yes, I'm on a journey. They have the awareness of where their gaps are and the development areas are. They don't need to have mastery levels of all skills. They can create and operate in an ecosystem of peers, mentors, coaches, online support tools that allow them to augment and maximize what they have. Because I think it could be quite overwhelming. And you asked us for one, and we gave you about 5 at the very beginning. Nobody needs to start off with everything. And then, if your business is a success, then you recruit a team of people around you to compensate and enhance and get the full skill set across the team. This might not seem obvious to a young entrepreneur at the start of their journey, but perhaps it does as time goes on.
So I would like to leave you with the words of a hockey player from Canada, actually, Wayne Gretzky. And what Wayne said when they asked him, how come you're successful? He said, I'm not playing where the puck is, I'm playing where the puck is going. So if you want to innovate for impact, you cannot have your programs be stagnant. And your approach to soft skills training has to change, and the set of skills you are changing has to become different and to respond the complexities of your marketplace for your young entrepreneurs. So please come get the analysis of what are those possible drivers of change, and also what are some of the skills that you might be able to incorporate in your future programs.
Миний хувьд бол ажлаа бол яг ихэндээ өөрхөн хүсэл зорилгын дагуу ганцаараа эхэлж байсан. Тэгээд сүүлдээ 5 болоод 7 болоод 12 болсон. Үүнийг дагалдаад бидний бас дуурайгаад бусад төвлөрөж жишээ болсон бол өөрч өдөө цаашаа бидний дагаад бол ерөнхийдөө бас олон эмэгтэйчүүд баг болж бас ажиллаж байгаа. Тийм болохоор би бол бусаддаа эзэн хичээл заяа хичээнэ гэж ер нь бол хэлдэг дээ. За баярлалаа.
Well, when I started the business, I was only myself, and after that we gradually expanded. 3 women herders joined me, and after that 5. And when I submitted the application, we were 10, and now we have 12. So that means that I used to say to other women herders that one of the interesting Mongolian proverb we have: if you are committed for your vision, then you can handle your life and lead others and other women actually. So that is actually what I share with other women in my village. Therefore, they are joining me, and also many other my friend women herders also, they're starting their own businesses in their villages. So that is actually what I want to share. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
That's a brilliant note to end off on. We've talked about inspiring others, having role models to get entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs into the system and encouraging them along. Our organizations likely know all of the harder skills that they need to equip entrepreneurs with, accounting or marketing or those types of things, and can support them through that. But supplement that, I think we've heard very loud and clear today that the soft skills are also there and required, and we need to have lifelong learning. We need to be resilient. We need to learn from our failures, which is something that we discussed yesterday, and I think is inherent in all of the conversations we're having here. And then I think, as Burm tied it up there, we need to encourage the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who go through the system to come back and give into that system in the way of being a role model, in the way of being a mentor. And that will complete the holistic success process. And in all of that, being organic and dynamic as we move along, and understanding, seeing where the puck is going, not playing it where it is. So thank you, everyone. I want to thank our panelists, Branca Minic, Namita Dada, Heidi Strawson, and Burm Monkshuren. Thank you all for the wonderful comments, and as I say, the conversation is just underway, so keep it going over the next couple of days. Thank you very much.